The Galactic Concord's Grand Hall was a marvel of architecture, a vast chamber where the leaders of the most powerful alien civilizations convened. Massive pillars carved from obsidian and infused with glowing veins of energy reached up toward a domed ceiling that displayed a holographic projection of the galaxy in real time. The room was filled with representatives of countless species, each one a testament to the diversity and vastness of the known universe. At the center of it all stood Supreme Commander Vornak of the Drask Dominion, his towering exoskeletal frame adorned with ceremonial battle armor, a symbol of his people's warrior culture. His deep, resonant voice thundered through the chamber as he slammed a clawed fist against the polished stone table. "The 1,000-year truce with humanity is over," he declared, his mandibles clicking in emphasis. His words sent a ripple of murmurs through the gathered officials. Some nodded in agreement, eager for war, while others exchanged uneasy glances, their bioluminescent skin flickering in uncertainty. Vornak's piercing gaze swept across the chamber. "For a millennium, we have let the humans expand unchecked, hiding behind their treaties and trade agreements, growing fat and complacent. No more. We, the great warriors of the galaxy, have allowed this insult to persist for too long." His words were met with approving growls from his fellow Drask warlords. The chamber's great table, a circular monument to diplomacy, now felt like the war council of an empire preparing for conquest. The representatives of the lesser species sat quietly, some afraid to speak, others secretly relieved that they were not the ones being targeted. At the far end of the table, Earth's representative, Ambassador Holt, was the only human present. Unlike the ornate robes and elaborate armor worn by the other delegates, Holt wore a simple, well-tailored suit, the very image of calm professionalism. He had listened silently to Vornak's speech, his expression unreadable. Now, as the Supreme Commander finished his declaration, Holt slowly leaned back in his chair, interlacing his fingers with an air of practiced ease. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "this is how you want it to go?" His voice was smooth, unbothered, as if Vornak had just announced the price of grain imports rather than galactic war. Vornak's mandibles flared in irritation. "Humanity's arrogance is its greatest weakness," he growled. "You believe your golden age of peace will last forever, but you have forgotten what it means to fight." He gestured to a nearby holographic display, which flickered to life, showing a series of charts and data projections. "Our intelligence reports confirm that your military has stagnated. You have decommissioned half your war fleets, diverted resources to civilian expansion, and focused on diplomacy rather than strength. Your people no longer remember war. Your soldiers are soft, undisciplined, unprepared. The Drask Dominion will remind you of your place." A few murmurs of agreement rose from the other delegations. The Zorith Imperium's ambassador, a spindly insectoid being, tapped its mandibles thoughtfully. "It is true," it said. "Humans have not fought a large-scale war in over 1,000 years. They rely too much on deterrence and their outdated alliances. Perhaps the Dominion's claim is not without merit." A smattering of nods followed, and the tide of the room seemed to shift in Vornak's favor. He straightened, pleased. "You see," he said, spreading his arms. "The galaxy agrees. The time for humanity's rule is over." But then Holt chuckled. It was soft at first, but in the heavy silence of the chamber, it was deafening. The smirk on his face was not one of fear, but amusement. Vornak narrowed his eyes. "Something funny, human?" Holt exhaled, shaking his head as if pitying a slow-witted child. "You really don't get it, do you?" He gestured toward the holographic reports. "You see all of this, and you think it means we're weak. That we've gotten lazy. That we've forgotten how to fight." His smirk widened. "That's cute." Vornak's mandibles clicked angrily. "Watch your tone, human. We are offering you the chance to surrender with dignity." Holt laughed openly now, a genuine, hearty laugh. "Surrender? Oh, that's rich." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Let me ask you something, Supreme Commander. If you were planning to wipe out an enemy, if you were preparing for a war that could reshape the galaxy, would you advertise it?" Vornak hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed his features, but he pushed it aside. "Your fleets are half the size they once were. Your defenses are scattered. What could you possibly—" Holt held up a finger. "That's what you think you see," he interrupted. "You think you've been watching us. But we've been watching you. And unlike you, Supreme Commander, we know how to keep a secret." Vornak's patience finally snapped. "Enough," he roared. "The Dominion will not be intimidated by human tricks. Our fleets are mobilizing as we speak. The invasion of Sol is inevitable." Holt's smirk never wavered. "Oh, I know," he said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "And I'm telling you, Supreme Commander, you've made the worst mistake of your life." He turned to leave, pausing only to glance over his shoulder. "You should have asked yourselves one thing before deciding to break the truce." Vornak glared at him. "And what is that?" Holt's grin was almost predatory. "What has humanity been doing for the last 1,000 years?" With that, he walked out, leaving a room full of suddenly uneasy warlords behind him.
The Dominion's war fleets surged forward through the void, a colossal armada of warships stretching across the vastness of space, their engines burning bright as they cut through the darkness like an unstoppable tide. Supreme Commandant stood on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by his officers, their forms illuminated by the crimson glow of tactical displays. The invasion of Sol had begun. His mandibles twitched in anticipation as he watched the fleets move into formation. Scouts had already confirmed that Earth's outer colonies had offered no resistance. Their aorbiter defenses were unmanned, their patrol fleets non-existent. Just as his intelligence had predicted, humanity had grown complacent, reliant on treaties rather than strength. The battle was going to be a slaughter. Turned to a towering warlord named Aordan the fleet to push forward, he commanded. "We will take Mars within the hour, then move on Earth. Let the humans tremble at our might." Nodded and relayed the Aordan. Across the fleet, warships powered up their weapons, ready to unleash devastation upon humanity's home system. And yet, there was something off. There had been no response from Earth. No distress calls. No planetary defense systems coming online. Nothing. The silence was unnatural. Then, without warning, the tactical displays flickered. At first, it was dismissed as a minor glitch, but then the flickering became erratic. The holographic projections distorted, lines of strange code appearing for brief moments before vanishing. The Dominion's most advanced sensors, which had mapped countless war zones with flawless precision, now showed only static. An uneasy murmur spread among the crew. Supreme Commandant, one of the bridge officers reported, was stitched with confusion. "Our scans are failing. Something is interfering with them." Claws tightened. "Impossible. Humanity doesn't have the technology to." The lights dimmed for a second, and then, a message appeared on every screen across the fleet. A simple sentence, written in an unmistakably human language. "You should have stayed home." A cold dread settled over the bridge. Before could issue a command, the alarms blared. Reality itself seemed to shudder as space around the Dominion fleet twisted, rippling like a fabric being stretched beyond its limit. Then they appeared. Not in front of them. Not approaching from a great distance. The human fleet did not come from where any rational commandant would expect. Instead, they emerged from the very void around them, slipping out of the darkness like phantoms. Vast, silent warships with no visible insignia, their surfaces sleek and black as the abyss itself. They had been waiting, cloaked, watching, and now they struck. The first attack came without a single energy signature, without the usual warning signs of incoming fire. One moment, the Dominion fleet was in perfect formation, and the next, entire Capita ships erupted in silent, eerie explosions, their hulls cracking apart like brittle glass. Not from outside fire, but from within. Sabotage. Mind raced. That wasn't possible. There had been no boarding actions, no breach alarms. How had the humans? Then the real assault began. Space itself seemed to darken as Earth's hidden fleet moved like predators, weaving through the Dominion's forces with terrifying efficiency. The Dominion's warships were built for open combat, for grand, overwhelming displays of power, but the humans fought differently. They didn't fight for territory or honor. They fought to eliminate. Human strike craft were unlike anything the Dominion had encountered before, small, agile, and completely invisible to targeting systems until it was too late. Van by van, Dominion ships were torn apart, their shields rendered useless by some unknown technology that bypassed even the most advanced energy barriers. Watched in horror as the main battleship group was obliterated in seconds. A Dominion dreadnought, proud and mighty, was there one moment and gone the next, its hull carved open by unseen forces before its core detonated in a silent explosion. He roared in frustration, slamming a fist against his command console. "Where are they?" he bellowed. "Target their ships. Return fire." "We can't, Supreme Commandant," an officer cried out. "They're jamming everything. We can't lock onto their positions." It was madness. The Dominion fleet outnumbered the humans nearly 3-1, but numbers didn't matter. The enemy was an enigma, striking from angles that should have been impossible, using tactics that made no sense. They weren't fighting a war. They were executing a slaughter. Then, across the battlefield, the largest human warship emerged. It was unlike any Dominion vessel, its design utterly alien even among human ships. It radiated no energy signature, gave off no heat, no emissions, only a cold, terrible presence. A transmission came through, overriding every Dominion frequency. A single voice, calm and composed. "Welcome to the real war, Supreme Commandant." Then, every Dominion ship's engines shut down at once. Every weapon system failed. Felt the lurch violently as the artificial gravity flickered. He watched in helpless rage as his mighty fleet was disabled like toys in the hands of an unseen child. "Impossible," he whispered. This is not possible." The human voice returned, this time with something almost resembling amusement.
The Dominion fleet was in full retreat, what remained of it, anyway. Once a force of thousands, the proud warships that had heralded the end of the human empire were now little more than scattered wreckage drifting in the void. Supreme Commander Vornak sat rigidly in his command chair, mandibles clicking in fury as the remnants of his armada limped toward the nearest hyperlane. The only thing that mattered now was survival. They had come with absolute confidence, prepared for a glorious victory, yet they had been hunted like prey. The humans had not fought them in a conventional war. They had dismantled them, piece by piece, like predators playing with their food. And they were not finished. All remaining ships divert power to engines. "Get us out of here now," Vornak snarled, his voice a sharp crack of desperation. Across the command deck, his officers worked frantically, sweat beading on their foreheads, hands trembling as they tried to override the damage inflicted on their systems. But the moment they reoriented toward the hyperlane, the battlefield shifted again. A ripple in the void, barely perceptible at first, began to expand in front of the retreating fleet. The darkness of space twisted unnaturally, warping like liquid glass. Then out of the abyss they emerged. More human warships, massive, silent, and waiting. They had been expecting this. There would be no escape. Vornak's blood ran cold. "Reverse course. Find another exit vector." "No, Supreme Commander," came the trembling voice of one of his navigators. "There are no exit vectors left." A new wave of human warships decloaked behind them, cutting off their last route of escape. They were boxed in, surrounded on all sides. But they didn't fire. They didn't need to. A transmission cut across all Dominion frequencies, overriding the static and chaos with the calm, deliberate voice of a human commander. "You were given a chance to leave." The words sent a fresh wave of terror through the crew. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement. Vornak's hands clenched into fists. "What do you want?" he spat, knowing that the humans could hear him. "If it is surrender you seek, I will not." Laughter. Actual laughter echoed through the transmission. Cold. Amused. Dismissive. "Surrender?" the human voice mused. "Oh, Supreme Commander, you still don't understand." The stars themselves seemed to darken as more of Earth's hidden fleet revealed itself. There was no grandstanding, no declaration of victory. Just the simple, undeniable truth. The Dominion had walked into a trap so vast, so meticulously constructed, that their defeat had been certain before the war had even begun. "Humans fight with honor," Vornak growled, his voice wavering. "You do not slaughter those who cannot fight back." For a long moment, there was silence. Then the voice returned, lower now, colder. "Do we?" It was then that the Dominion realized their mistake. The truce had not existed to protect Earth. It had existed to protect them from Earth. For 1,000 years, humanity had watched, waited, prepared. They had built their fleets in the shadows, created technologies that the Dominion couldn't even comprehend. They had let the galaxy believe they were weak, passive, easy to conquer. And when the time came, they hadn't fought a war.
They had executed a correction. Vornak watched helplessly as one of his remaining dreadnoughts simply vanished. No explosion. No weapons fire. It was just there one moment and gone the next, erased from reality like it had never existed. A quiet, efficient form of destruction. A message. The Dominion had been allowed to flee, so they could live with the knowledge of what they had unleashed. The transmission resumed, final and absolute. Run. Hide. Regroup if you wish. It will not matter, because now, Supreme Commander, you have seen what we are, and we will never be unseen again. Then the human fleet turned, slipping back into the void, disappearing just as silently as they had arrived. They didn't need to finish off the survivors. The damage had already been done. The Dominion had lost more than just ships or warriors. They had lost something far worse. They had lost the war before it had even begun.
The silence in the Dominion War Council chamber was absolute. High-ranking officials, battle-hardened warlords, and veteran strategists sat in stunned disbelief, their reptilian and insectoid features betraying fear they had never known before. The massive display at the center of the chamber flickered with the remains of their once mighty fleet, now reduced to drifting wreckage. Reports of entire armadas erased without a trace scrolled down the screens, accompanied by intercepted human transmissions, taunting, amused, terrifying. Supreme Commander Vornak stood at the head of the table, his mandibles clicking anxiously, his claws digging into the reinforced metal of the war table. His once proud eyes, which had glared in defiance against 1,000 enemy fleets, now wavered with something alien to him. Uncertainty. He had led the Dominion's greatest invasion force with confidence, assured that the humans would crumble before their might. He had believed, as all Dominion leaders had for centuries, that the 1,000-year truce was a shield for Earth, that humanity had grown soft, fearful, reliant on treaties instead of strength. But the truth was something far worse. "They let us believe the lie," Warlord Kartok finally muttered, his 4 yellow eyes fixed on the carnage displayed before them. "They wanted us to think they were weak." The words settled heavily over the chamber. It was the only explanation that made sense. Humanity had spent a millennium shaping their own legend, presenting themselves as a species bound by diplomacy, restraint, and reason. They had allowed the galaxy to believe they feared war when, in reality, they had been sharpening their blades in the shadows. The Dominion's greatest military minds had been outmaneuvered before they even fired the first shot. A junior officer hesitated before stepping forward, datapad clutched tightly in his trembling hands. "Supreme Commander, we've intercepted another human transmission," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was sent to all known Dominion territories." Vornak didn't respond immediately. His eyes remained locked on the burning remains of his fleet, his mind playing back the last words spoken to him by the human commander before they vanished back into the void. "Run. Hide. Regroup if you wish. It will not matter." Finally, with a slow, deliberate motion, he gestured for the officer to play the transmission. The chamber darkened, and a massive holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the war table. The image was grainy, corrupted by some kind of deliberate interference. It showed only the outline of a human figure standing in the shadows. Their face was obscured, their expression unreadable. And then they spoke. "You have seen what we can do. You have seen what we choose to do." The voice was calm, almost amused, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent of warning. "You assumed our truce was a sign of weakness, that we feared war, that we relied on diplomacy to protect us. You were wrong." A new image flickered onto the screen, a galactic map littered with red markers. Each one represented an empire, a kingdom, a civilization that had once stood as a dominant force in the galaxy. And each one was now gone, erased. The Dominion had never questioned these disappearances before, believing them to be the result of internal strife or unknown external threats. But now, the meaning was clear. For 1,000 years, we have been patient, watching, learning, preparing. You thought you would march into our systems, claim our worlds, and break us beneath your boots. But you do not understand. The map zoomed in until only one glowing blue dot remained, Earth. It sat at the center of the chaos, untouched, unmoved, unnoticed for so long. You came to make war. But we do not fight wars. We end them. The image distorted into static, but the voice remained. You have one choice. You can leave and never return. Or, you can stay, and learn why the others vanished. The transmission ended. Silence choked the chamber, thick with the realization that the Dominion, the greatest military force in the galaxy, had finally met something beyond its understanding. Warlord Karthok exhaled slowly, shaking his head. We cannot fight this. Supreme Commander Vornak wanted to disagree. He wanted to bellow in defiance, to demand retribution, to call for vengeance against humanity. But the words would not come. Because deep down, he knew the truth. There was no vengeance to take. There was no war left to fight. The moment they had declared war on Earth, they had already lost. We will withdraw, Vornak finally said, his voice hollow. We will return to our borders. And we will never speak of this again. The War Council members glanced at one another. Some hesitated, their pride warring with the reality they faced. But one by one, they nodded. There was no other path. As the Dominion's leaders left the chamber in silence, Vornak remained, staring at the blank holoscreen where the human's transmission had played. He knew what the official records would say. They would claim that the Dominion had chosen peace. That the war had ended in a stalemate. That humanity had been spared. But he knew better. He knew that, for the first time in history, the Dominion had not spared an enemy. It was the Dominion that had been spared.